So we're looking forward to this session, a new framework for design-centric ecosystem for higher growth. This panel is brought to you by Cumulus Association. Cumulus is the International Association of Universities and Colleges of Art, Design and Media. It currently consists of 357 members from 66 countries, initiated to build a dynamic and flexible academic forum to bring together top-level educational institutions worldwide. Our panelists for today's session are Professor Ravi Poovaiah, Professor of Emeritus Fellow, Industrial Design Center, IIT, Bombay. His current pedagogic as well as research and design interests are in fields related to interaction design, new media design, visual design, and product design. And his research interests are in areas related to visual language, information visualization, visual narratives, wayfinding systems, interactive devices, collaborative social and learning environments, as well as designing for children. Professor Poovaiah has worked on projects with major industry leaders such as Microsoft, Yahoo, Google India, Motorola India, India Oil Corporation, Bharat Petroleum Corporation, Bharat Electrical Limited, and Siemens India, among others. The next we have among us Ms. Mamta Rao, presently the Dean of National Institute of Design, Bengaluru campus. She's the principal faculty in IT integrated design streams and is the discipline leader for master's program in interaction design. Currently, she's a member of the Governing Council and Senate of NID. She also carries the responsibility of being a co-chair for research and development and has earlier served as a member of various academic and administrative committees at NID. She has various publications to her credit, including in journals and books in areas of design briefs, IT integrated designs, creative thinking, and digital heritage. Next on board we have Mr. Krishan Jagota. He's the head of product design, Sideways Consulting and president of Mumbai chapter, Association of Designers of India. He's helping businesses innovate through design thinking and execution. A brand strategist and industrial designer from NID at heart, Krishan is an amazing illustrator who can draw using both his hands, an awe-inspiring magician who can surprise people with tactful tricks. Equipped with his experience in Germany, Krishan is now contributing to a diverse range of design projects at Sideways Consultancy, Mumbai, as the lead industrial designer and brand strategist. Next, we have amongst us our very own Ms. Archana Surana. She is a design educator, mentor, and social entrepreneur with 28 years of experience innovating in design education. She successfully carries forward the legacy of 22 years as the founder and director of Arch College of Design and Business. She is the elected board member in the Cumulus Executive Board the year 22-25 and is a member of the CII National Committee of Design India and CBSE Committee on Skill Development. She represents Arch at various national and international platforms. Welcome, everybody. Over to you.
Thank you, Manan. It's a pleasure to have such an experienced panel which has traveled from all over the country to be with us for this very special session here at the Rajasthan DigiFest. While we know that this panel is specifically for the Cumulus Association and its member institutions who are from 66 countries, representing 357 universities in art, media, and design. We have our very eminent institutions from the Indian subcontinent here, the IIT IDC Mumbai, the Indian Institute of Technology. We have NID, the National Institute of Design, Bengaluru, and the Association of Designers of India, with whom the Cumulus has a MOU already. So we have Professor Ravi Poovaiah, Ma'am Mamta Rao, and Krishan Jagota, our panelists for today's session. And today's session has three very strong keywords. It talks about new frameworks for the future. We're going to be looking at design ecosystems. And high growth is something that we all aspire for. While these are three keywords that every youth wants to relate and connect with, the industry is looking at what would these new paradigms mean. We have experts who are with industry experience and bringing the academia and the industry together with research opportunities. And on the other hand, we have these new possibilities in the digital media where interaction design, user experience, user interaction is the future. Looking at these aspects today, I have these insights that I am looking at from an experience that will come from Ravi Poovaiah with 4 decades of being into design education. Ma'am herself being for almost 3 to 4 decades again into design, having moved from SPA to be at the NID. And Krishan, a very interesting engineering background and getting into hardcore product design and working now with a lot of artificial intelligence, which he calls as shared intelligence. These are going to be something that, I'm sure that each one of us is waiting to really hear what Professor Ravi has to say with his experience of 4 years into practice, research, and design. So, Professor Ravi, the stage is here for you because he has recently developed a new framework for the CBSE schools, the Central Board for Secondary Education, Government of India, which is about initiating design thinking to the school education system, introducing it at a much earlier stage within the middle school's education. So the curriculum for already 6 to 9 standard is ready, and the next part is about to be released. So I'm sure that, while working closely with the industry and higher education and research, working towards how we can take design to the masses, to the school education system, impact more lives, to create an ecosystem that will nurture high growth. Professor Ravi.
Thanks so much, Archana. Thanks again for inviting me here. Glad to be here. Okay, it seems to be like a really nice happening event. Okay, so let me try to put the context in place. Okay, so I think first I'll try to very short history of how design happened in our country. Okay, followed by the stakeholders involved in this, in this journey. Plus third is we need to look at the future, what's going to happen. So the kind of ecosystem which is happening within our country. So I think these are the 3 steps, to put it very, very, in context. If you look at India, right, India was a place of arts and culture for a very long time. If you look at it, our GDP was the highest in the world at one point of time. Okay, so that means that the essence of crafts and arts was inbuilt into the system itself. So when we got our independence and also the industrialization which happened in the West, we needed to adopt it to make our lives better, right? So some of the initiatives we don't really realize, it's actually the initiatives have come from the government. For example, the setting up of the NID as an idea itself, and then funding it for it to happen. Similarly with the school where I am, even IITs were actually formulated by thinking behind saying that the country needs institutions which can take it forward in terms of technology. And they managed to house a design school within that context, okay? So, in some sense, we have to be thankful to the government for having that vision and also having, people who have supported it. So the 2 institutions came up and they were there for quite some time. But if you look at the ecosystem at that point of time, it was actually the applied art colleges, which was the backbone of the media. Even now, for example, if you look at media and entertainment, the applied art schools have played a very major role. And these are very old schools, okay? So new schools came in during the 60s, okay? And I think the context is also important. It was a phase of social, development. The focus was on that and not really on industrialization. So we had to wait till the country opened up in the late 90s. When it opened up, it kind of paved a way for design to happen because that's when the industry needed innovation, if you look at it. So the first time, the designers started, making a difference to the country was from the 90s onwards in a very large context, okay? But I think the 2 or 3 decades before that, gave ample opportunity for institutions like NID and IDC to experiment, call people from abroad, collaborate, think of things that are good for the country. So if you look at many of the projects that were done there, they were very socially, important projects. Even the students were encouraged to take up projects like this. So that's a legacy which the schools had, okay? And I think opening of the economy made a big difference. I think lots of other schools started coming in, the privatization started happening, which is something which is a must actually. You cannot depend on the government for everything. Okay, so I think what happened in the last 10 years is really a kind of curve which has kind of expanded so exponentially, from, two so-called design schools, when it started off, now you have about 350 schools coming up, okay, which looks like it's too much of a growth, suddenly happening. But let's look at the larger context, okay? If you look at the way the country is growing up in terms of its GDP and the opportunities that are going to provide, right? You need youngsters to take up these challenges, okay? So that's one part of this story, okay? Which is what you're talking about in terms of higher education, graduating in design, okay, at either the bachelor's level or the master's level, and now at the doctoral level. Okay, so that's one part of the story. So let's look at the other part of the story. Okay, if you look at India, right, India has a very large number of people who actually acquire skills. They might actually acquire these skills from going to an aptech and learning a software. But if you look again back at the industry, a lot of the work which is getting done from DTP to jewelry to 3D modeling are done by these people. See, they have the skills, but they don't have the theoretical understanding of it. And if you ask me for the estimates, it's almost 1 million plus who get trained in this area. Now, how do we actually make use of these skills for the future development of the country? Okay, so there's a very nice document which the ministry has put together, which is the new education policy 2020, which says that even if you have skills, let's recognize them as equals. Okay, so even if you learn some skill, if you spent 1 year on it, you get a certification. If you spend 2 years on it, you get a diploma. If you get a 3 years, you get a degree. If you spend actually 4 years, you get a professional degree. And they're not equating between engineering and, let's say, welding. If you get skill sets which is worth 4 years, they said it's actually equivalent to getting a degree from another, which is, I think, a very nice thought. Okay, so this is a new framework which is happening, okay? At the same time, there's something which has happened, again, partly because of the national education policy. It identified the new skills that are required for the 21st century, okay? And couple of them being critical thinking and design and innovation. They call it as innovation, and many times they've used the word creativity in the NEP 2020 mandates. Okay, so if you put together these two things, the best way to do it is if you can actually start the process at the school level. Okay, so a year back, the ministry formed a committee to bring in design thinking and innovation at the school level. Okay, so it's not just a small subject. It's 650 hours that you spend in physics, chemistry, or maths, the same thing you spend in design, across from 6th standard to 12th standard. So if this program really takes off, you can imagine the creative mindsets it's going to create. Okay, even if you don't perceive design as a career later on, the structure of how you actually try to solve a problem and look for innovation can actually go in a very long way. Okay, which is, I think, is something that we actually country has to look forward to. Okay, and I think these are all frameworks which are happening, which will add up, one after another and make a big difference to the country. And I think we also have to thank the present movements for it. It's a very, very good combination of movements. Okay, one is that the country is growing, so it needs more professionals in this area. Okay, at the same time, the the schools and the pedagogy has to actually match to that need. With that short,
Thank you, Professor Ravi. I think that's a very that's a very interesting beginning. And you touched upon creativity. You touched upon a developed India. Right. While the Prime Minister has been emphasizing about the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and it talks about a developed India, which is driven by innovation and technology. If that's what the mandate is, and this government has also tried to put forward a foot to say that it needs to be digital Rajasthan, or digitization is very key at every level. Ma'am, while we're looking at creativity, you've been nurturing students for all this while, NID being a premier institution in the country for almost like 6-7 decades now. The kind of contribution that the country has in terms of the design thinkers it has nurtured over these years. You have one of your, master's student who's here. He's not a student anymore. But what I mean to say is that with the great legacy this institution has, and nurturing creativity. And here we are talking about schools. Where do you see this new framework? How relevant do you see that, will design thinking be? How will it be able to nurture creativity when Ken Robinson says that, creativity has to be treated like literacy at this point of time. The new future would demand high levels of creativity.
Right. Before I get to creativity, I will just talk a little bit on the layers of design, right? What you see as the outermost layer is something that we see with our senses, the visceral part of design. So design operates at the visceral part, which is the aesthetics and how it's composed together. Design also operates at the behavioral part, right? How easy is a product to use, how friendly it is, how durable it is, how affordable is it. So there are a lot of these things. The third layer of design, and these are not my words, I really get inspired by Don Norman, who talks about these 3 layers of design. And the final third layer is reflective level of design. So if you look at Maruti, a lot of Indians, if you ask them, which car would you like to buy? Many of them say Maruti, and if you just talk to them a little about why is it that they desire a Maruti when there are many more brands, they talk about something called as service, right? Maruti's service is much better. So after buying your car, post-buying process, Maruti has invested a lot of time and design thinking in that area as well. So essentially what I'm trying to say, when you're thinking of creativity, there are these various layers that you can think of. You can think of, a compositional creativity, which is related to aesthetics. You can think of how does something function, and is that function understood by your user, whoever is your target audience. You're talking about the second layer. Reflective is something I take a step back, is it so when I wear my watch, I'm wearing my father's watch. I wear it because of my reflective, that essence that it belongs to my father. So that reflective thought is also a part of design. So a longer durable products, if whatever you make, right, based on your creative thinking, I think they will run a longer timeline. Then coming back to creative thinking, right? Essentially, creative thinking doesn't happen in vacuum. So what is the inspiration for creative thinking? So if you were to design or put together an ATM, I would suggest please go and observe a lot of people using those ATMs. That's where you might get some inspiration. So I think designers take a lot of inspiration from the context around them, right? And that context helps them frame a problem, what Sir was telling. How do you frame this problem very innovatively? For example, let's say somebody asked me to put together a design for a bank and at an enquiry counter. I could simply take the problem the way it is, or I could study the bank and then I might realize it's not about putting a software together. It's about, just putting one person to take care of the queries and the back office work, right? So the context, the kind of context that you will study and observe and how you will frame a problem. I think that also is a part of creative thinking.
Very nice, ma'am. So I can hear that the whole user-centric approach is very, very important, which today probably we're calling it as empathy. And the moment how you interact with your environment, the habitat, and all these are going to be aspects that is very important when one is looking at creativity and the user-centric approach.
Just one more point. And when I say user-centric approach, it's not very new. So don't think about it as a very alien theoretical approach. If I were to buy a mobile phone today, I will do my set of study. I will see who's the, what kind of mobile phone, so which is called as, competitive analysis. I will go and talk to my friends, which is all about interviewing or surveying. So we do that in our day-to-day life. So do not think of it as a theoretical perspective, but something that we do naturally in our life. We bring that in our professional work as well.
So, ma'am, just a little insight if you could just give here. One is a structured way of learning and the other could be a very organic way of learning, right? Both have creativity built into it. You being an educator for this long, how have you tried to factor that aspect of taught creativity versus a very organic creativity?
Right. So if you look at learners, right, there are some learners who are very comfortable with structured approach, right? There are some learners who do not like structured approach. So they go well with organic. So in education, if you can, look at the learner and provide that freedom accordingly. The other advantage of structured approach is your learning curve is shorter. When there is an organic approach, I'm going to do a lot of iterations and I will realize something works much later. So it's possible the time frame that I'm using is slightly longer. So research helps us bring in some perspectives on what makes learning enriching. It can provide us certain thumb rules, and that structured approach helps a lot of students to go up the hill slightly more quicker. If we were to allow all students to be organic, many of them will not know where to go or what to do. So from that perspective, I think a good balance between structured and organic approach is something that we need to look forward to.
Great. You know why? Because I was talking to Krishan and he talks about the aha factor and the free play in education and for any learner to actually nurture his creativity. So tell me, Krishan, what you've been doing, because the workshop today itself was such an aha moment when we really saw that how AI could be a whole new opening to a new beautiful future for all of us.
Yeah, so thank you so much firstly for having me on a panel with such experienced and visionary people of our country. And thank you for taking us globally to the Cumulus board. You are a super energetic evangelist of design in Jaipur, and I'm happy to be here again. Talking about interdisciplinariness, like we were discussing, and also this idea of balance, I think that's also very rooted in humans. Everything that we do is interdisciplinary. Somebody's taking care of electricity and water supply here, which I don't have to be bothered about, but I'm dependent on them. And so are they dependent on us for this event to be a big success, for example. Secondly, I think it goes back to how Yuval Harari calls it in his book Sapiens, that we are the only species that controls fire. And as a result, we can chill. We can sit down and just talk. You call this chat a fireside chat. Now the wolf and the tiger is scared of us in the night because we can show them fire. And as a result, agriculture is born. As a result, we can grow a potato and a tomato basis where we want it to grow. As a result, we decide professions. We say, okay, you are an engineer, you are a designer, you are a mathematician, and so on and so forth. So this structured approach actually ensures safety in our society. So the idea of a structure in education is actually ensuring the next generations will be foolproof in their survival, in their everyday approach, in their living, right? At the same time, the profession that we guys are in, we actually are people who asked questions and broke away from the box that the world was putting us in. We actually are people who said, oh, we don't want to be the usual. and we came out. So we are constantly seeking this change. So as a young designer coming in and wanting to become even, guided somewhere, the same structure could have a loophole of turning them into yet another template. So you come out of the usual disciplines of engineering and management and the disciplines we are more used to hearing in our country to this creative world. And unfortunately, I see it in design institutes as I go back to my alma mater also, that there are these pamphlets that students bring. I am a UI UX designer, I'm a product designer, I'm a graphic designer, I do everything. It's like almost parking yourself next to this array of 5 hotels and everybody trying to sell themselves to you. So in pursuit of me finding my truer self, I took this discipline. The trap of the structure could be that I become yet another template. And that is where I believe in what Sugata Mitra had said when he talked about hole in the wall concept, where he said, if you put a hole in the wall and put a computer there, you wait for homeless children to walk around and 3 months later they're talking right click, left click, zoom in, zoom out. And the technology becomes a tool for learning to happen. So I think the role of the structure is only to nudge. The goal of the structure is to actually ensure that free play happens. And that as many stimuli as are institutionalized in our everyday environment today. You pick up your phone, you have social media. Constantly you are being offered something. That are we as design institutes partnering with technology and being made available to the youth in a language that they're constantly witnessing? Because that is a bigger structure that we are a part of. So everything out there that is a stimuli for young people should only be a nudge to empower them to play more, in my opinion. And you're bang on. Of course, there's no doubts in what you're saying about starting at a very young age. Because if a young boy installs Facebook at the age of 18, why shouldn't design thinking come at the same age? If a young boy or a girl is on Snapchat at the age of 13, why shouldn't, forget about engineering. It's still, but creativity is at our play. We pick up crayons, we break crayons, we draw a tree how we want at that young an age. Then why was it even surprising to not have design curriculum as a part of education at a young age?
At the global level, if you look at growth, the indicators are very different for different nations. When you look at India as a nation, and from a global perspective, we have a great, startup ecosystem which is completely thriving on new technologies. How do you see, Professor Ravi, that the new future, which is like, say, 2030, because we also have a roadmap for our, 100 years of our, thing which the government has given as 5 prongs. If being independent of a mindset which is very Western in approach, and that is a limiting factor for us in terms of exploring our creativity and being innovative. How do we address this? Because it is still in our understanding that design is a very Western concept. It was evolved by the Germans or after the Industrial Revolution. Whereas when we look at design from a more holistic and a more deeper research and understanding, India as a nation is a very fertile land when we look at design systems, design processes, design ecosystems. In fact, there are varied ecosystems that exist within this ecosystem. Whereas in the Western world, there might be different, orders that each nation has. But as a country, we bring in a great amount of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary understanding. What do you see as possibilities for the youth of this nation? On a global level, they can make an impact and create that kind of the real voice of design. That would be what the Japanese today call it Society 5.0. And on the other hand, we have the metaverse, which is talking about a whole new decentralized economy and a world which will be all without boundaries. I think it's a beautiful time that we all are into, where my generation, this generation, and the generation which is now up to there are going to be stepping all together and seeing a whole new revolution happening.
Yeah, Totally agree with you. You know, the next generation has to be the one which is creative, which has this inquiring mind, and that's, I think, a very, very important point of it. Okay, so I think there are many little bits of ecosystem which is getting developed. Okay, first is, be innovative. Okay, so that's a term which is being used everywhere. So you want to create that innovative ecosystem, in the universities, in the schools, okay, at other places. So that's one way of looking at it. In fact, the ministry has a cell for innovation now. They think that design and innovation can make a big difference to our country. So it's both a question of, the students having the confidence to create something on their own. Okay. The second, I think the push is that they're saying if you can start something on your own, okay, it actually starts a whole family of people who are trying to look in that direction. So it gives employment, it develops skills. Then you have to actually look at doing something new. Okay, so that ecosystem is a very, very important ecosystem, and it's probably part of the startup ecosystem. To make it happen, you'll see that the startup ecosystem is almost at all levels. It's at all the universities. There are centers in the cities which try to do that. Financial institutions kind of help you out. It's not an easy thing to do, but at least the things are getting in place. Okay, so that's the second, I think, very, very important thing that has happened. Third is creation of facilities. For example, there's tinkering labs called the Atul Tinkering Labs, which are coming almost in every taluk of a country. So a student can walk in there and have facilities which probably his school or institution doesn't have. Okay, it's supposed to help you actually create ideas and prototype them. Okay, so these are all, I think, small steps which add up, and if you look at the future, they'll all add up to being something really useful to the country itself. And the question about, taking inputs from the West, I think it is because that design really matured and happened in the West. Industrialization itself happened over there, and we were followers. Okay, so it takes a while for a country to mature and get confidence. And if you look at India, it's at a stage we are having that confidence now. Okay, and I think it's time actually we also are looking at our own roots now, at our own culture, which we didn't have the confidence. Typically if you ask a middle class parent, he wanted the kid to go to the West to study, rather than, having confidence in our own systems, right? So that has to change. And the same holds for our culture. That's why I think the design kind of reflects the West. But I think when the confidence changes, right, it automatically starts looking at our own. And I think we'll have something called as an Indian design, which will come forward. And I think the time is also ripe for it.
Thank you, Professor Ravi. I think that kicks another question here, that our indigenous knowledge systems, I mean, the world has learned from these knowledge systems. They have written books, they have really put it together. They are the ones who've actually documented. And we as, Indians probably took it for granted. And we probably also have a very oral economy, culture. And the culture has probably not allowed us, and also the whole essence of Vasudev Kutumbam, which is all about, sharing, shared knowledge, shared wisdom. That's a part of our whole ecosystem. So the individualistic approach of having things being documented, certified, or put to name by somebody was something that has not been a part of our culture. I think the Western world has gotten us to understand this now. So my question to you is, Kishan, because you've been in the West, you've worked in Germany as well, and you are this new age product designer. You're working a lot with AI, and you have a lot of belief while you're doing Hindustani music, and on this side, and on the other side, you have products that you design which are world class. Where do you see this fusion, this marriage happening between, and how can that our youth can embrace that? Because I think it's very important that our people now speak the language which the world can also relate and understand with, because it's a time for collaboration and cooperation. And I think as all, and Cumulus, and if you look at the member institution, the intent is knowledge sharing, sharing best practices. I mean, how can they learn from us? I've seen that, you know, they're so keen, the world is so keen on coming and doing research here, working with us together, because they understand the deeper nuances. We at times probably forget it, and because it's in our backyard, right? So where do you see the connections coming in for you? And
So we are definitely a country where our parents and our grandparents take charge of values, instilling in us from a very young age, where especially doing research for Disney, we had met over 150 kids and their parents. And this is what we heard, that they can go to the school and learn about math and physics, but they have to learn values from home. Now, while this is a great fundamental that is instilled in young India, there are certain traps. When you say money, most middle class talks about money as an evil. When you talk about fame, most spiritual and religious practices tell you that to be super famous is meaning you're superficial, right? And we come from a heritage of doing the job, especially as creative people, and not bothering about ownership, right? You ask who's the architect of Qutub Minar. Does anybody know about the architect of Qutub Minar here? But everybody knows who's the king who got it made. But if you ask about, like you said, an architect who made Chandigarh, you'll say Le Corbusier. So when it is about people from the West, yes, they take pride, and why not? If you've come up with something that is so beautiful that the world must celebrate, the art and the artist should be held together. The artist needs recognition. And that is changing. We come from a place where we never identified as individuals. We believed in a joint family, we believed in a tribe, we believed in togetherness. That is why you still have artisans of Rajasthan doing things together as a community. And you preserve that heritage, no one artisan is called out. However, at the same time, I see in other fields like advertising, like music, like Bollywood, we have individual stars. And my personal thought is, it is because we deal on that side with the retail economy. The aspect of business that talks directly to the consumer requires a hero. The aspect of business that is back-end maybe does not require a face. Now that the world is so gradually joining hands and there are content creators, we have NAS Academy, we have so many other people, the faces of individuals have become important. And so here is an opportunity actually for young India to bridge the gap of ownership in design and cultivate that as a habit of celebrating yourself out there, not just nationally, internationally, with the platforms like these that we have. And I think we are on our way to do that.
right. So ma'am, with as you've been teaching interaction design, user interface, the new world is about the metaverse. You know, it's going to be like one leg here and the other leg in the metaverse. And we're very soon, maybe another 2 to 3 years, we're going to see 2 parallel universes that we're going to be operating into. Where do you see an opportunity in terms of collaboration and cooperation, and how easily we can get our youth to adjust to both these 2 universes, the verses, I mean, rather.
Right. I'm going to begin with, am I heard? Yeah. I'm going to begin with what Professor Poovaiah said. You know, we have this infrastructure and facility that government has invested in, and we do have places which is makers spaces, right? The other thing that we have very strong right now, and we always had, is context, right? The kind of diversity in India and the kind of varied problems or contextual things that you see in India, you don't see anywhere in the world. We are a very diverse society, which means we have a fertile ground to see what is it that we can do in various domains. It could be domains of agriculture. There's hardly any designed interventions that we've been doing. Now, agriculture is also embracing modernity. It's becoming technology enabled. You have hydroponics, aquaponics. So with our context and the new technologies that are coming in, I will say there's a lot of scope for innovation, putting the two together. But innovation doesn't come easy, let me tell you. Innovation doesn't come by just sitting on a chair and procrastination. I'll do this, I will do that. I think we have to go to these maker spaces, have a network of friends who inspire, begin to collaborate with them. So it could be an engineer, it could be a designer, architect, whoever. I think these multidisciplinary, so change this place where you hang out. So I think these maker spaces should become your space where you will hang out, you will nurture your thought process, you will interact, you will do a lot of peer learning. So I see infrastructure being laid by the government, a lot of efforts put in by the government. We need to take that step and, you know, be able to converse with a larger society and do a bit of learning and doing together.
We've really touched very interesting aspects today, and I see that there are a couple of questions which we have from the audience, and we'll keep it confined to very specific questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I was having a question that as you talked about design thinking, critical thinking, what are your views on ecological thinking, thinking in terms of ecology, keeping the nature in factor? So if you want to, like, if you incorporate design thinking in schools, what about you incorporate design thinking and ecological thinking both in the schools? By thinking whatever you make or whatever you develop, keeping nature as a factor in that segment. So what are your views on the same?
Just to make it clear, design thinking is not chaotic, right? It is actually structured thinking. You know, it's a process, okay? So which has some steps that you can follow, and that typically helps you in solving a problem. Okay, so the structure is at the core of it. Okay, logic is at the back of it, and technology is what you need to use for solving problems. So I think what you're asking is not a different question. It's the same thing. You know, see, for example, design thinking as a process can be applied in any field. I mean, you can be a lawyer and apply it in the way you actually solve a problem. You can be a doctor and use this process to find a new solution. You know, so it's not dependent. It's not that only designers use it. Designers used to use it, and now it has come to recognized as a very nice method and a very simple method, in fact, for it to be applied to any field. You know, so one of the things we are trying to do is that we are telling teachers, for example, use design thinking process in teaching mathematics or chemistry or physics. You know, it will make it much more interesting for the children. You know, so that's one. And it's not that they do something which is crazy, but I'll actually look at it in a very logical and a structured manner. You know, I hope it answers your question.
Thank you, sir.
What I hear is that predictability and unpredictability are two aspects, right? So a structure gives you predictable outcomes. You will get some results which are going to be inconsistent with a certain thought process. And while unpredictability is what human beings always look forward to, they want change, and they are looking for some kind of transformation that can inspire them, right? The whole idea of new is always emerging in their heads. So I think it's a balance of the two, and when we look at design thinking, that the process itself is a certain predictable way of going about.
थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर द सदन के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद कि डिज़ाइन के बारे में मेरा कोई क्वेश्चन है, मैं एक सॉल्यूशन है। मैडम ने एनआईडी के बारे में जानकारी दी, मैं क्योंकि डिज़ाइन सेक्टर और क्लस्टर सेक्टर और एसएमईज़ की बात कर रहा हूँ। एनआईडी के बाद में डिज़ाइन क्लिनिक स्कीम इज़ देयर। कितने लोग एसएमई सेक्टर में इस्तेमाल करते हैं डिज़ाइन क्लिनिक के लिए, ये बहुत बड़ा इशू है। दूसरा है अभी जो जेड सर्टिफिकेशन स्कीम आई है एसएमईज़ के लिए, इन दोनों को हम कंबाइन करके एक स्ट्रेंथिंग करें तो हमारा जो एसएमई सेक्टर है वो डिज़ाइन सेंट्रिक बन जाएगा और उससे जीडीपी बढ़ेगी, जीडीपी बढ़ा नेशनल ग्रोथ हो जाएगी। इसमें एक सजेशन है, क्यों न स्टेट लेवल की डिज़ाइन क्लिनिक के ऊपर वर्कशॉप हो, जिससे जितनी भी एसएमई सेक्टर हैं वो डिज़ाइन सेंट्रिक बने, बिल्डिंग को डिज़ाइन बनाए, वाटर कंजर्वेशन, एनवायरमेंटल कंजर्वेशन, एनर्जी कंजर्वेशन, फूड कंजर्वेशन एंड रेन वाटर हार्वेस्टिंग एसएमई सेक्टर।
हमने डिजाइन पॉलिसी के लिए बोला है, वी हैव रिकमेंडेड द गवर्नमेंट फॉर अ डिजाइन पॉलिसी फॉर द स्टेट, whereas there is something that exists with the India Design Council, some kind of parameters for competitiveness. which the government has put certain. And we were talking about that we need designers in governance, because they have a different view to the way they look at things. So looking at why, today we are talking about technology. I mean, today technology and design, technology in itself is nothing if it does not have design as its, foundation. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to actually deliberate on the importance of design and how design can actually enable all the other aspects to all come together, whether whatever, our infrastructure, our technologies, the soft and the hard, all can be put together. Any views here, ma'am? What he was about?
He was MSME clinic, right?
Yeah, design clinic scheme that they had. We were
I think
also a part
I'll
of
have
it,
to
yeah.
understand that slightly better. Maybe,
So, I'll let you know. Yeah.
अच्छा, तो आप बता रहे थे कि ऐसे स्कीम्स होने चाहिए. What is he trying to say?
So he's just
Acha,
giving his view that,
Right.
he's a well experienced person within the government and other sectors. So he's giving his view how we can actually bring competitiveness through design within the SME and the
Okay, so MSME clinic जो आप बात कर रहे हैं, उससे कोई फर्क पड़ा था SMEs में?
we were a part of it as well.
Yeah.
So there's little that it could create as an impact. Yeah.
नहीं
Yeah.
मैं बात करूंगी आपसे. आई थिंक आपका क्वेश्चन समझने में थोड़ा टाइम लग रहा है मुझे. I'll talk to him later maybe. Yeah.
Any other question? Yes.
So wonderful session on design. मैम एक आपने यूज़र सेंट्रिक अप्रोच के बारे में बात की थी डिज़ाइन के पर्सपेक्टिव से, एंड मैम स्पोक अबाउट मेटावर्स. Now in the decentralized economy of metaverse, how do we ensure that the design quality and the design aspects remain at least to the quality level, and it improves over a period of time? Because in the metaverse, the control will go to the users. There will be nobody to guide them, even suggest them. So if you want to create a design culture or, build that creative ability within the youth and children, how can we do that in the metaversial world?
Right. So you're saying the users are going to, be very active in what they take, right? So
Right.
from that perspective, what I was trying to say is when you look at your products from the point of view of who's going to be your target audience, I think you have a better possibility of, fulfilling the requirements of that user. And I'm hoping the connection to the user is going to be better because you know the kind of requirements this user is expecting, and hence that connection is much, much better.
Okay.
I would like to just add one thing. So, do you use Instagram?
Yes.
How many of you use Instagram? So when you send a message on Instagram, who's sending the message?
We are sending.
So just think about it. Are you sending a message on Instagram in a way you would have wanted to send the message? Or are you limited by how Instagram wants you to send the message?
Limited by the Instagram.
So essentially, what we think as the medium is often not the medium. In fact, the consumers are potential mediums. What I'm trying to say is, I could only write a letter and send it. There was a point in that. But today in the app space, Instagram can have 5 different ways I converse with you. And yet it only gives me one. I'm really limited in my experience of how I use an app. So actually, I am the message Instagram sends. So my profile, and I'm coming to your point of the metaverse. Now what happens in the metaverse? Why I'm talking about Instagram first is for a lot of people who are not aware of the metaverse today or how it is going to be in the future. It's going to be a place where, like you said, ownership. I'm going to own a certain digital space. I'm going to craft it in my own way. I'm going to start deciding how this aspect of that user experience fulfills itself with others. In my belief, it is more empowering. So it is more true to the design, like she's saying, versus current technologies. Current technologies limit you in your expression. Metaverse is only going to empower more people to express in a way they deem fit.
I understand. My question is not that. My question is that in the decentralized economy, how that creative mindset or the design culture or thought process can be incorporated without we being present there. I'm trying to little bit understand on that, because these are all designers, right? They may have some creative abilities, but they are not interacting with us in this environment.
The small answer is we don't have to do it. We don't have to be in this pressure.
Possibly.
Hear me out. I've been to a house, a Gujarati house, during my research for Fevicol, where I saw 7 different designs of tiles in the same room. Because the grandmother loved that design, the father loved that design, the mother loved that design, and the son loved that design, and the guest loved that design. And under it, there was some Vastu pyramids that nobody also sees. Now, who am I to decide what is good design for them? The idea of decentralized is that everybody decides how their house looks like. Correct? If that's from a visual point of view. If you're talking about at general in large to set up rules of aesthetics, I think we can only nudge and people evolve eventually. What I think that my style of design is the best right now, maybe sir is far more evolved than I am, and eventually he'll want to push me harder. So I think it's the onus on the individual. And as the metaverse itself will evolve, you will see people like you will come up with startups, and people will come to you to get design consultancy in the metaverse, and that will be your business model. So there will be many ecosystems that will come within to serve these services. Sorry.
Just wanted to give an example. You know, Rangoli is a classic example from our culture. You know, it's got a structure, but that structure can be used in different ways in different parts of the country using different materials. And if you realize all are sustainable materials, so that's a very nice, amount of freedom that you get and a choice that you get, but within a structure. You can look at it like that,
Nice. Thank you so much. I think it's a wonderful explanation.
Can I make an observation with your permission? Actually, I'm going to say something to support a contention that you brought in, which is about being Indian. When will design become Indian, right? So I want to put it into a larger framework where, if you look at the United Nations, if you look at the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, etc., they're all actually the handiwork of the Western economies and the Western political economies, right? And I think when Modi became the Prime Minister, he addressed it by saying 1/6 of the world's people don't get to have any say, in spite of the fact that we contribute very handsomely to these through peacekeeping forces, through monetary contributions, etc. Okay? So my point here is that by talking about design being Indian, we weaken ourselves. What we need to do is to ask, when the Industrial Revolution happened, the split that essentially happened was in the Industrial Revolution mediated economies, they came to depend on technology, and so they became technology mediated economies. And what did we do? We remained culturally mediated economies. If you look at the world, the globe, the technologically mediated economies are the Western economies. But if you look at the rest of the geographies, they're culturally mediated. And we should not be talking about Indian, because, when you build something in India, if you think in terms of Africa, South America, all of those demographics, our products are right on with them. That is why our generic pharmaceuticals have been such a hit in Africa, right? And we are hailed for that. So why not say that design that comes out of any of these geographies are one? And then we take on the world where we say, you know nothing about how to deliver messages to this part of the world. And I'm not trying to create a rift. I'm simply addressing the fact that for too long, we've been told what to do. And in one of the 5 months, the Prime Minister said, stop wondering about certifications from the West, okay? So just one example I would like to make here. You know, you work in a company called Sideways, and that obviously comes from the art of looking sideways by Alan Fletcher, right? The British designer. In his book, Art of Looking Sideways, and I just want to tell everybody, whoever doesn't know about the book, that if someone says, I want to give you a good birthday gift, grab that book. It's a thick book, it's a little expensive, but say, I want that book for a gift, okay? In that book, Alan Fletcher, he says that human beings, when they are born, unlike calves, unlike elephants, take longer, far longer gestation period to survive. 9 months in the womb, come out at least 2 years for the kid to even have a chance of living. How do you do that alone? You do that through society. You know, like Hillary Clinton wrote this book, It Takes a Village. So we learn those lessons very early, okay? And these part of the geographies that I'm talking about still adhere to that. It's that society that sits together and decides or mediates what we're going to be doing. We feel irritated by that, but that's called social design. If you Google social design, the only information you'll get is social design is 10 years old, these are the definitions, etc. That is because Google is ruled by the West. And so the social design definitions come from there. 10 years? We're talking about 100,000 years of social design that is integrated into our DNA. We don't talk about that. So when we design, we're looking at IDEOs, shadowing, and all that. Why? Because our design thinking, our thought process is different. And our thought process has social design integrated into it from coming down across the millennia. Even if you don't want it, it's going to be inside you. That's why till we become grandparents, we keep on showing, keep on buying things. While we will die an unhappy person if you haven't done things till the end. That's not true in the West. 18 years, you're out. Empty nest for a few months, I'm good. I'm going to use my money for myself. Can you imagine that in India? Can you imagine in India where we talk about sustainability, we want definitions from elsewhere? Why? You are in your house, your grandmother gets irritated when the tap goes tip, 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 tip. And she says, ye to Alakshmi hai. And you've understood. And she will make you go there and shut it. Because she knows every drop counts for. And what is the definition of that? Do we need definitions from elsewhere? We have sacred forests. We worship the tree every year. In cities, Charles Correa said, even today, the urban, educated, fashionable have sacred spaces. They go around the water. You know, the water puja, we have snake, Manasa puja, we do all that, right? So, Indian is not just Indian. Indian is this whole axis of folks. And we would make a mistake if we kept saying Indian, Indian, Indian. No, we are actually one world there. And if you talk to those in Africa, typographers, others, you'll see that we think alike. Because after all, that's the cradle of humanity from which we came, and we retain most of those thoughts. So we do not have to look at definitions that are extraneous. Look for your own definitions. Ask your mom. Ask your grandmother. They'll tell you what it is. And I teach at IIT Bombay, IIT Jodhpur, IIT BHU, and when I say these things, I get feedback later. You know, they come back to me and they say, ma'am, I thought about it, and something happens. So I'm just saying that it is not about being parochial. I'm just saying that we have things that we don't talk about, right? We are constantly looking for proverbs from elsewhere. The proverbs are inside us. Start using them, guys. Start using them. It's inside you. You have to tell them what it is. For a change, you tell them, okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we get like these new terms, social design, universal design, emotional design, experience design. So there's so many realms where design can be applied. So I think it's a great opportunity for young people to actually explore and have it evolve as design has evolved globally. I think in nationalities also, regions also. It's evolving in its own way. And it's not important to put it in a definition of what somebody said. People are constantly looking at design from a very new perspective now. So I think today's conversation was all about bringing a very different perspective for our world audience, which are going to be from the, more than 66 countries, who are already our member institutions at the Cumulus. So I'm really glad to be on the executive board and having the member institutions represent here today on this panel. So thank you so much for your contributions. You've come from Mumbai, you come from Bangalore, and I think it's a great opportunity that, the state has put up a very important fest. There are a lot of young people who have actually going to be here, who have come all over from the state, from the different engineering, medical, and different kind of institutions and different streams and disciplines of education. And for them to understand design and technology from a more holistic perspective, it's very key because as the DMI report says that, they did a research on the Fortune companies. And they said that the companies which were design-centric were the ones which did better businesses than the other ones. So I think design has a very key role to play. And it is all about, being fully expressed. I somewhere feel design is all about full self-expression. The expression could be an individual, the expression could be a community, the expression could be a company, the expression could be a product, the expression could be a moment. So I think that's how design can, each one of us needs to create our own definition of design where we are truly creating the delight, the experience, and bringing the more holistic understanding into the space where we are nature-bound people, I'll say I'm using the word bound because nature is what we thrive on and our nature is what we need to respect. And when we look at design from that holistic perspective, of we being responsible designers, responsible citizens, I think that's where design will constantly evolve. Thank you so much.